All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to break down one of the cleanest, most powerful ways to structure your backend code, the service repository architecture. We're going to walk through it all with a really simple TypeScript example, and I promise, by the end of this, you'll see just how awesome it is.
So let me ask you something. Does your backend code ever feel, well, like a tangled mess? You know, where you've got business logic all mixed up with database queries and your API handling is getting tangled up with data validation? It's a super common problem, and it makes code an absolute nightmare to maintain or test. But what if there was a better way?
Well, there is, and it's this, the service repository architecture. At its core, this pattern is all about one simple, powerful idea: separation of concerns. It does this by splitting your entire application into three totally distinct, independent layers. So, what are these three layers that promise to make our lives so much easier? Let's take a high-level look at the structure. Honestly, the best way to get this is to think of a restaurant. First, you've got the controller. That's your waiter. They take the orders from the outside world. Then you have the service. That's the chef. The chef knows all the recipes, they do all the actual cooking and thinking. And finally, you have the repository. Think of this as the pantry, the place that just manages getting the raw ingredients, or in our case, the data. This breakdown really gets to the heart of it. The controller just handles communication, all the HTTP stuff. The service is the brain. It contains all your important business logic. And the repository? Its only job is to talk to the database. Each layer has one very clear job to do, and that's it. Okay, let's jump into the code, and we're going to start from the bottom up with the layer closest to our data, the repository. I like to call this layer the data's gatekeeper. And this right here is the golden rule. The repository's world is super simple. It's only responsible for your basic CRUD operations. Create, read, update, delete. It has absolutely no idea why it's fetching data. It just knows how to get it. So first things first, before we can manage any data, we've got to define what that data looks like. Here, we're just creating a simple TypeScript interface for a user. This acts like a contract, so we have a consistent shape for our user data everywhere in the app. Next up, we build the actual user repository class. Now, to keep this example really simple, we're just using a basic in-memory array. But you can imagine this could easily be a connection to a real database like Postgres or Mongo, and the methods are exactly what you'd expect: create, find all, find by find. Just plain simple data management. Okay, so we've got our data layer sorted. Now let's move up one level to the service. This is the real brain of the operation. This is where all your important business logic is going to live. And here's the magic, right? The service is the orchestrator. It might need to fetch a user, then check if they have permission to do something, and then save a change. It makes all this happen by calling methods on the repository. But, and this is the crucial part, it has no idea if that data is coming from an array, a SQL database, or a text file. That separation is the whole point. And check this out. This is how we connect the layers. See how the user service doesn't create its own user repository? Nope. Instead, it gets one passed into its constructor. This pattern is called dependency injection, and it's the secret sauce that makes these layers so flexible and, maybe most importantly, so easy to test. Okay, this slide is where it all clicks. Look at the left. The repository's job is dumb and simple. Just push a new user into the array. But on the right, the service is doing the thinking. It's asking the repository, hey, real quick, does a user with this email already exist? That is a business rule. The service decides if a user should be created, while the repository just handles the simple mechanics of creating it. See the difference? All right, we've made it to our final layer, the controller. Think of this as the bridge between the outside world, like an API call coming from a browser, and all that smart logic we just built. So yeah, the controller's main job is basically to be a translator. It takes an incoming HTTP request, it pulls out the data it needs from it, and it passes that data along to the right service method. Then it waits for the result from the service and packages it all up into a nice, clean HTTP response. Take a look at this creator user handler method. It doesn't know anything about email validation or how to query a database. All it does is call this.userservice.createUser, and then it handles the result. If everything goes well, it returns a 201 status code with the new user. But if the service throws an error, like that duplicate email error we talked about, it just catches it and returns a 400. It's clean, it's simple, and it's perfectly focused.
So we've seen the what and the how. Now, let's get to the best part, the why. What is the big payoff for structuring our code this way? Why go through the trouble?
Well, using this pattern basically gives you developer superpowers. First, that separation of concerns we keep talking about makes your code way easier to understand and work with. Second, your testability goes through the roof. You can test all your business logic in the service by just giving it a fake repository, no real database needed. And third, you get this incredible flexibility for the future.
Let's talk about that flexibility with a real-world example. Imagine your app takes off. It's a huge success, and that simple in-memory array you started with just isn't going to cut it anymore. It's time to switch to a real scalable database like MongoDB. Now, usually, a change like this is a developer's worst nightmare.
But with this architecture, it's almost easy. Because your service and your controller have no idea how the data is stored. They don't care. The only thing you need to change is the code inside your user repository. You just swap out the array logic for MongoDB calls, and the entire rest of your application stays exactly the same, completely untouched. That is a massive, massive win.
And that's pretty much the whole thing. We've seen how the service repository architecture separates concerns to create code that's not just clean, but also super testable and incredibly flexible. So the final question I want to leave you with is this. Think about the project you're working on right now, or maybe the one you're about to start. How could this pattern bring some of that clarity and simplicity to your work? Thanks for tuning in.